If there's one thing to be taken from this book, it's that the state is an idea. The people viewed as agents of the state, lawmakers, police, and military, would not be able to maintain their positions without the consent of the population. If a significant portion of the population, the exact percentage I am not sure, is opposed to a given state, then the people who make up that state will not be able to command the population as a whole. This consent need not be deeply held patriotic fervor. Simply keeping your mouth shut and paying your taxes and not giving matters of state much thought works just fine. The fact that the state is just an idea was seen very starkly during the fall of the Soviet Union. In June of 1991, Boris Yeltsin won the country's first democratic election and became the president of Russia. Mikhail Gorbachev was the general secretary of the Soviet Union at the time. In August that year, the New Union Treaty, which would reform the Soviet Union into a confederation of states with a uniform military and foreign policy, was going to be signed. On August 19th, a group of hardline communists commanded some troops to prevent the signing of the treaty. As the troops approached the White House, which was the parliament of the Russian Republic, a large crowd formed to prevent the troops from entering the building. Gorbachev had already been placed under house arrest by the army at that time. On August 19th, Yeltsin climbed the top of one of the tanks and addressed the crowd. On August 21st, the troops were ordered to attack the White House. As the troops moved to attack the building, they were met with blockades by the partisans. The troops killed 3 partisans, and the partisans stormed a mechanized infantry vehicle, and the troops then abandoned the vehicle, and that vehicle was destroyed. No soldiers were killed, but the soldiers just withdrew anyway. And then the Soviet Union dissolved quickly after that. It's an interesting story that can be explored in much more depth, but the principle to be derived is that this event was just how, obvious it was that the battle was of a psychic construct. You had the authority of the generals who organized the coup, the authority of Gorbachev, the authority of Yeltsin, the authority of the Russian protesters, and all of these authorities were mere projections. The idea that Boris Yeltsin was the president of Russia is nothing more than a story which the agents who followed his orders believe in, and which the petty bureaucrats believe in, and which the people of Russia largely believe in. Thus, because these people believed that story, they would follow what he said, or in disputes with each other, they would cite Yeltsin as an authority when presenting their case. The idea that the generals were generals was another story. The lower officers believe the generals are generals, and so will cite orders from the generals when telling the privates what to do, or as evidence when they have a dispute with other officers, etc. And when you see these stories for what they are, stories, the events surrounding the fall of the Soviet Union appear as an expression of mass insanity. When I read these events, I recognize that there is no such thing as the General Secretary of the Soviet Union, and that there is no such thing as the Soviet Union except as a mass hallucination. The mythology of the Soviet Union fell apart as technology made the world more interconnected. It wasn't so much defeated as outgrown. In the early days, a bunch of pre-industrial peasants, the story of the state was titanic and fantastic. But as time went on, people could see the West. Technology allowed people in what was called the Soviet Union to see what was going on just a few miles away in West Germany, people they could talk to. And so the Soviet Union, the story of the Soviet Union, eroded. Why would the lives of the massive people called Russians be affected by killing Boris Yeltsin, this man picked as team captain for the Russians? How does preventing a piece of paper from being signed, whose symbols have completely subjective meaning, prevent the mass of Russians changing who they obeyed? When one team captures their opponent's flag, what? But of course the events at some building where some guy signs a piece of paper only have significance if the fantasy of the state is believed. And when you consciously recognize the state as a fantasy, you will see that you are surrounded by mystics and live in a dark age. Hopefully, as technology gets more advanced, the state altogether will be outgrown. Individuals can see the entire planet, can do a Google search on any product, food, or drug, and see the health ratings of a consumer's report. This was not possible when the FDA was founded. The uninsured are getting doctor's visits at Walmart for $45. The idea of a state monopoly on currency is being questioned more and more, and people are realizing it's no more real money than Chuck E. Cheese tickets. In fact, Chuck E. Cheese tickets inflate a lot less. Gangsterism and various fanaticisms are becoming increasingly marginalized, a relic. Nuclear weapons render conventional warfare obsolete. People can see each other. The veil is being lifted, and it's not scary anymore. I think it's important to know that kids aren't bad. Going through it logically, a child's behavior is a result of his genetics and upbringing. If it's a result of his genetics, well, then it's not their fault. If your bad behavior was a result of your genetics, then you have no reason to beat yourself up any more than not being able to lift 500 pounds. If your bad behavior was a result of your upbringing, and remember, your parents were kids, probably less intelligent than you, then you simply responded to the incentives as they were presented to you. Your habits formed in response to incentives, creating a structure of habits. This habit structure was punished or derided for not being correct by the same people who laid down the incentives, those kids who raised you. A child cannot go against his parents in any systematic way. If the parent told the child he was bad, then the child would internalize that he was indeed bad. And this is before the child can evaluate these propositions, and so the child is taught that he is bad, then the layers of thought develop over that to sustain this horrible fantasy. This is not to say that one enjoys believing they are bad, any more than one enjoys believing Barack Obama is the president or enjoys a nightmare, but just that they do believe it. Also, the parents who are just kids probably told you that getting good grades is good. Why would this be? The state forces people to pay for education camps that they mismanage, and any alternative education plan must be approved by the designated state agency. As a kid, you are effectively forced into one of these gulags and told by the parents that good performance is good. It is insane, and the parents usually buy into this nonsense. I was constantly berated by my parents by my parents and my peers and my teachers for getting bad grades. It was darkly hilarious that these teachers were actually trying to teach things to anyone but the most promising and engaging kids. That is, they were actually trying to teach the average person to appreciate Hamlet. And it was such a clown show having to sit and listen to some fat Mexican chick tell us the meaning behind the bean trees. And yes, if you had a problem with some pretentious mouth breather who couldn't get a real job telling you how many times a month you can urinate at certain times of the day, well then there's clearly something wrong with you. You have kids going into puberty. They are physically and mentally ready to burst out onto the world. And what is their assigned task? To spend their days in tiny little rooms, in tiny little desks, in neat little rows, being taught the most vapid, mainstream academic horseshit there is, and then getting graded on it. Lincoln was a good man. Roosevelt pulled us out of the Depression. Some smart kids do take smart classes, and I see it like the smart people being trapped in this anachronistic Prussian system. That is, those few people make the school somewhat worthwhile, and then look around and perhaps buy into the nonsense that everyone deserves a public education. Most of the kids were raised by immature kids. That is, they were told to believe in morality defined by kids, or morality that is a bunch of mainstream sewing circle nonsense. Then, before any of this damage was repaired, they were sent to 12-year education camps where their minds were systematically destroyed and were programmed to obey the state. Remember, a .gov website is always a reliable source. And you can see this process occurring. Early on in the semester, the kids are energetic, asking questions and doing things, and over time the habits settle into lines. Sit at this table, go to this class, go home, do this work, maybe go to this training facility. And I believe it is this combination of the parochial and parenting and the Prussian education that makes people slide right into obeying the state. It serves the same braking function as the religions of the past.